They said I was too young to run the family business. I left and became their biggest competitor. I'm Alex, 28M, and I come from a long line of restaurateurs. Our family's journey in the food industry began back in 1965 when my grandparents, Giuseppe, Grandpa Joe, and Maria, immigrated from Italy with little more than their recipes and dreams. They opened a small pizzeria in our hometown, pouring their hearts into every dish they served. I grew up hearing stories about how Grandpa Joe would wake up at 4 a.m. to make fresh dough, and how Grandma Maria's tomato sauce was so good that people would buy it by the jar. Their little pizzeria became a local favorite, and as their children, my dad Tom and his siblings, grew up, they naturally fell into the family business. My dad, Tom, 58M, was always the most passionate about expanding the business. He met my mom, Linda, 56F, when she came in as a new waitress, and they fell in love over late-night cleanups and early morning prep. Together, they took Grandpa Joe's pizzeria and turned it into a full-fledged Italian restaurant. They were a great team. Dad was the visionary with big dreams, and Mom was the practical one who kept everything running smoothly. By the time I was born, my parents had already opened 2 more locations in neighboring towns. My childhood was a blur of kitchen aromas, the clinking of plates, and the warm chatter of satisfied customers. I remember doing my homework in quiet corners of the restaurants, watching the controlled chaos of the kitchen during dinner rush, and sneaking tiramisu when the pastry chef wasn't looking. My older sister, Megan, 32F, was always more interested in the front-of-house operations. She had a knack for customer service and could charm even the grumpiest patrons. Our cousin Jake, 30M, Uncle Bob's son, joined the business right out of high school. He was more into the financial side of things, always talking about profit margins and expansion opportunities. As for me, I loved every aspect of the restaurant business. I would pepper the chefs with questions about their techniques, help Mom with the bookkeeping, and even created my first menu item, a spinach and ricotta stuffed chicken, when I was just 14. It was no surprise to anyone when I decided to study business management in college, with a minor in culinary arts. During my college years, our family business continued to grow. By the time I graduated, we had a chain of 10 restaurants across the state, each one successful and beloved in its community. It was an empire built on my grandparents' recipes, my parents' hard work, and our family's collective passion for good food and hospitality. I joined the family business full-time after college, bursting with ideas and energy. At first, everything seemed great. We were all working together, expanding the business, and profits were soaring. I introduced a new computerized ordering system that streamlined our operations, saving us thousands in lost inventory. I also pushed for a revamp of our menu, introducing some healthier options alongside our traditional dishes to cater to changing customer preferences. My crowning achievement was starting a successful catering division, which opened up a whole new revenue stream for us. But about 3 years ago, things started to change. My parents began talking about retirement. They wanted to hand over the reins to the next generation. That's when the problem started. Megan and Jake, who had been working in the business longer than me, felt they deserved larger shares of the company. They argued that they had more experience and had contributed more over the years. I disagreed. While they had been there longer, I had brought in new ideas that had significantly increased our profits. The modernized ordering system alone had boosted our efficiency by 30%. The arguments got heated. Family dinners turned into business meetings, and then into shouting matches. I remember one particularly bad night when Jake accused me of trying to hijack the business with my fancy college ideas. Megan chimed in, saying I was trying to change too much and that we should stick to what had always worked. My parents tried to mediate, but it was clear they favored Megan and Jake. They said I was too young, too inexperienced to have an equal say. It hurt to hear my dad, who had always encouraged my ideas before, now dismissing them as risky and unnecessary. Things came to a head last Thanksgiving. We were all gathered at my parents' house, and the topic of the business came up again. The turkey was getting cold on the table as Megan suggested that I should only get a 20% share, while she and Jake each got 40%. I was furious. I had poured my heart and soul into this business, and now they wanted to sideline me? I stood up and told them exactly what I thought. I laid out all the improvements I had made, the profits I had brought in. I even had a folder of financial reports to back up my claims. But they wouldn't listen. My dad actually told me to know my place and that I should be grateful for whatever they decided to give me. That was the last straw. I walked out of that dinner and didn't look back. The next day, I emptied my desk at the main office and decided to start my own restaurant. It wasn't easy. I had some savings, but not nearly enough to open a restaurant in a prime location. I had to settle for a small place on the outskirts of town. The first few months were tough. I was working 18-hour days, doing everything from cooking to waiting tables to balancing the books. There were nights I slept on the small cot in my office because I was too exhausted to drive home. But slowly, things started to turn around. My innovative menu, which combined traditional Italian flavors with modern culinary techniques, started attracting attention. Food critics gave me glowing reviews, praising my bold reimagining of classic dishes, and word of mouth spread. Now, a year and a half later, my little restaurant has become the hottest spot in town. We're booked solid every night, and I'm planning to open a second location. I've assembled a team of talented chefs and staff who share my passion for great food and service. It feels like I'm building something special, something that's truly mine. Meanwhile, I've heard through the grapevine that the family business isn't doing so well. Apparently, Megan and Jake have run it into the ground. They've been more interested in drawing big salaries for themselves than in investing in the business. They've lost several key staff members, including our head chef who had been with us for over 20 years, and the quality of food and service has gone downhill. I've seen some pretty brutal reviews online, with former regulars lamenting the decline of their favorite restaurants. Last week, I got a call from my mom. She was in tears, begging me to come back and help save the family business. She said they were on the verge of bankruptcy and that only I could turn things around. Part of me wants to help. These restaurants have been part of our family for generations. I think about Grandpa Joe and Grandma Maria, and how heartbroken they would be to see their legacy crumbling. But another part of me is still hurt and angry at how they treated me. The words my dad said at Thanksgiving still ring in my ears. And I can't help but think that if I hadn't been pushed out, none of this would have happened. I don't know what to do. Should I go back and try to save the family business? Or should I focus on my own successful restaurant and let them deal with the consequences of their actions? The rational part of me says to stay away, but there's still a part of me that cares deeply about the family business. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. Your perspectives really helped me think through this complex situation. After much consideration, I decided to meet with my family to discuss the situation. I didn't want to make any decisions without having all the facts. So, I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a conference room at a local hotel. I chose this spot deliberately, wanting to keep this as professional as possible and avoid the emotional pitfalls of meeting at someone's home. When I arrived, I was surprised to see not just my parents and sister, but also my Uncle Bob, 61M, and Aunt Sarah, 59F, who are silent partners in the business. They all looked stressed and tired, a far cry from the confident, almost arrogant people they were at the Thanksgiving dinner. My mom's hair had more gray in it than I remembered, and my dad looked like he had aged a decade in just a year and a half. As soon as we sat down, my dad started apologizing. He admitted that they had made a huge mistake in undervaluing my contributions and pushing me out. He said they had realized too late how much I had been doing for the business. Hearing this from my dad, who had always been so proud and sure of himself, was shocking. It was clear how much it cost him to admit he was wrong. Then my mom pulled out a folder and started going through the numbers. It was worse than I had imagined. They had lost almost 40% of their regular customers in the past year. 4 of their 10 restaurants had already closed, and 2 more were on the brink. They had taken out loans to try to keep things afloat, but they were drowning in debt. Seeing the actual figures was like a punch to the gut. This was the business my grandparents had started from nothing, that my parents had built into an empire, now teetering on the edge of collapse. Megan and Jake were uncharacteristically quiet during all of this. When I asked them what had happened, Megan broke down in tears. She admitted that they had been out of their depth. They had focused on short-term profits, raising prices and cutting corners on quality to boost their salaries. They had ignored customer complaints and staff concerns, thinking they knew best. Jake chimed in, saying they had also made some bad investments. They had tried to open a high-end fusion restaurant without doing proper market research, and it had been a spectacular failure. As they talked, I could see the toll this had taken on them. Megan, always so polished and put together, looked frazzled and exhausted. Jake, once full of bravado about his financial acumen, could barely meet my eyes as he admitted to his mistakes. My Uncle Bob then made their proposal. They wanted me to come back as the CEO, with full control over all operations. They were willing to give me a 51% stake in the company, making me the majority shareholder. The rest would be split between my parents, Megan, Jake, and my aunt and uncle. I was stunned. This was more than I had ever expected. But I also knew it would be a huge undertaking. The business was in shambles, and it would take an enormous amount of work to turn it around. I thought about the long nights I had spent building my own restaurant from the ground up, and realized that saving the family business would require even more effort. I told them I needed time to think about it. I also said that if I did come back, there would be conditions. I would need full autonomy to make the necessary changes, even if it meant letting go of family members who weren't pulling their weight. I made it clear that this wouldn't be a return to the old way of doing things. If I came back, it would be to completely overhaul the business. They agreed to give me a week to decide. As I left that meeting, my head was spinning. On the drive home, I couldn't help but think about all the history tied up in this decision. I thought about Grandpa Joe teaching me how to toss pizza dough when I was barely tall enough to see over the counter. I remembered the pride in my dad's eyes when I suggested my first menu item. I thought about all the family celebrations we'd had in those restaurants over the years. But I also thought about my own restaurant, the one I'd built from nothing. The team I'd assembled, the reputation we'd built. Was I willing to risk all of that to save a business that had pushed me out? I'm still undecided. My own restaurant is doing well, and part of me just wants to continue on that path. But I can't help feeling a pull towards the family business. It's where I grew up, where I learned everything I know about restaurants. I'd appreciate any thoughts or advice as I try to make this decision. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How did you handle it? The weight of 3 generations of my family's hard work is on my shoulders, and I'm not sure what to do. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I've got some news to share. After a lot of soul searching and number crunching, I decided to take on the challenge of saving the family business. But not in the way they had proposed. Instead of just stepping in as CEO of the existing business, I proposed a merger between my restaurant and the family business. This way, I could bring in my team and my successful business model, rather than just trying to fix their broken system. It wasn't an easy decision to make. I spent countless nights poring over financial reports, consulting with lawyers and business advisors, and wrestling with my own emotions. When I presented this idea to my family, it wasn't an easy sell. My family was desperate, but they were also proud. The idea of merging with my little restaurant, as they had once dismissively called it, was a bitter pill to swallow. I remember the look on my dad's face, a mix of desperation and wounded pride. Megan and Jake were initially resistant, seeing it as a further loss of their own positions in the company. But eventually, they saw it was their best option. We spent weeks negotiating the terms. There were heated arguments, tears, and more than a few slammed doors. But slowly, we started to find common ground. In the end, we agreed on a structure where I would own 60% of the new combined company, with the rest split among family members based on their previous ownership and contributions. I also insisted on bringing in an independent board of directors to prevent future family disputes from affecting business decisions. This was perhaps the hardest pill for my family to swallow, the idea of outsiders having a say in our family business. But I stood firm, knowing it was necessary for the long-term health of the company. The past 2 months have been a whirlwind of activity. We've closed 3 more of the underperforming restaurants, focusing our resources on the ones with the most potential. It was heart-wrenching to see the places I'd grown up in being shuttered, but I knew it was necessary for the survival of the business as a whole. We've retrained staff, revamped menus, and started rebuilding our reputation. I brought in my head chef from my own restaurant to overhaul the menus, blending our traditional favorites with some of the innovative dishes that had made my restaurant so successful. We've also implemented the efficient ordering and inventory system I had tried to introduce years ago. It hasn't been easy working with my family again. There's still a lot of tension, especially with Megan and Jake. They're struggling to accept their reduced roles in the company. I've had to have some tough conversations with them about their performance and future in the business. There have been shouting matches and tears, but slowly, we're finding a new way to work together. My parents are trying to be supportive, but I can tell they're having a hard time seeing me as the boss. They keep trying to offer unsolicited advice or override my decisions. I've had to set clear boundaries, which has led to some heated arguments. It's strange to be in this position with the people who raised me, who taught me everything I know about this business. On the positive side, we're starting to see some improvements. Customer numbers are slowly climbing back up, and we've had some good reviews of our revamped restaurants. We're not out of the woods yet, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. Last week, we had our first day where all our open locations were profitable. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. I'm exhausted but also excited about the future. This is the challenge I never knew I wanted, but now that I'm in it, I'm determined to succeed. Not just for me, but for all the employees whose livelihoods depend on this business, and yes, even for my family. Every time I walk into one of our restaurants and see families enjoying meals together, I'm reminded of why we started this business in the first place. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Wish me luck. Update 3. It's hard to believe it's been a year since I took over the family business. So much has changed, and I wanted to share a final update with all of you who have followed this journey. First, the business news: we're profitable again. It took 9 months of grueling work, but we've turned things around. We've successfully rebranded the restaurants, focusing on locally sourced ingredients and a mix of traditional favorites and innovative new dishes. Our customer base has grown, and we've even opened 2 new locations. The journey hasn't been easy. There were times when I questioned my decision, especially in those early months when we were hemorrhaging money and I was working 20-hour days. But slowly, surely, things started to improve. Our new menu items started gaining traction, and word began to spread about our revitalized restaurants. One of our biggest successes was a farm-to-table initiative that I spearheaded. We partnered with local farmers and suppliers, not only improving the quality of our ingredients but also supporting our local community. This initiative resonated with our customers and earned us some great press coverage. The family dynamics have been complicated. Megan eventually left the company. She couldn't adapt to her new role and the changes I was implementing. It was a difficult decision, but ultimately better for everyone. The day she cleaned out her office was tough for all of us. There were tears and bitter words, but also a sense of relief. She's now opened a small catering business, and we're slowly rebuilding our personal relationship. We had dinner together last month for the first time since she left, and while it was a bit awkward, it felt like a step in the right direction. Jake, surprisingly, has stepped up. After some initial resistance, he threw himself into learning and improving. He's now managing our catering division and doing a great job. It's been amazing to see him grow and take on new responsibilities. We still butt heads sometimes, but there's a new respect between us that wasn't there before. My parents have finally started to truly retire. They're still on the board, but they've stopped trying to micromanage and seem to have accepted that the business is in good hands. Dad still drops by the restaurants occasionally, more as a customer than a boss now. I can see the pride in his eyes when he looks around at what we've built, and it means more to me than I can express. As for me, I've learned a lot about leadership, family dynamics, and myself over this past year. It hasn't been easy, but I'm proud of what we've accomplished. The business is stronger than ever, and while our family relationships are still a work in progress, they're improving. One of the most rewarding moments came last month when we celebrated the 60th anniversary of Grandpa Joe and Grandma Maria opening their first pizzeria. We threw a big party at our flagship restaurant, inviting longtime customers, staff, and of course, the whole family. Seeing 4 generations of our family together, surrounded by the legacy we've built, was incredibly moving. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support throughout this journey. Your perspectives helped me navigate some tough decisions. For anyone else dealing with family business drama, my advice would be, stand your ground, know your worth, but also be open to reconciliation if it comes with real change and respect. This will be my final update. It's time to close this chapter and focus on the future. We've got plans for further expansion, and I'm excited to see where we can take this business in the coming years. Thanks again, everyone. Comments. User 1, wow, what a journey. Congrats on turning things around. It takes a lot of courage to step back into a situation like that after being hurt. You should be proud of yourself. User 2, I'm glad things worked out, but am I the only one who thinks the family got off too easy? They treated Op horribly and then came crawling back when they needed help. I hope they've truly learned their lesson. User 3, as someone who works in a family business, I can relate to so much of this. Family and business don't always mix well. Op, you handled this situation with a lot of grace and wisdom. Well done. User 4, this is like a real-life version of that show Succession, but with a happier ending. Thanks for sharing your story, Op. It was really interesting to follow along. User 5, I'm curious about how you manage the day-to-day stress of all this. Running a business is hard enough without all the family drama. Do you have any tips for maintaining work-life balance in a situation like this?